Welcome to Sunday School. This is our second to last session for our mission, The Great Unfinished Task. Carl and Debbie Drake are on their way back to Michigan, so they will be back soon, and Carl will be teaching in a couple weeks. Today, we're going to actually look at two videos, Recent Progress in the Great Commission, Part 1 and 2. So we'll just play them kind of back to back. So when the first one ends in about 15 minutes, just stay put for a little bit. The next one will start shortly after that. Let's open with the word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for today. God, we thank you for your word. God, I thank you for your heart of love for all people that compelled you to send your son to the cross for us. And God, I pray that you will continue to put in our hearts that same love for those around us. And Lord, that you will continue to spur us on to the ways that we can be part of the Great Commission here in our own communities and around the world as well. In your name we pray, amen. Enjoy.
Another. So from the Mount of In our last session, we talked about the what and the why. We talked about what are people groups and what are unreached people groups. And we also talked about why. Why should we reach unreached people groups? And I gave you three compelling reasons from Revelations and from Acts as to why we should be involved in bringing the gospel message to the ends of the earth. Even though the task that Jesus has given us is far from being done, I think we all recognize that. And even though most Christians see themselves as having some kind of personal exemption from being a part of the Great Commission, there is some recent progress. There are some exciting things that God is doing. And so in this session, session number 5, we're going to focus on this question. Where are we seeing progress in the Great Commission? So that's our task in this session. So before we go there, I want to begin with a quote by Henry Blackaby. In his book, Experiencing God, Blackaby says this: watch to see where God is working and join him in his work. I love this quote. What this implies that God is working. In fact, God has always been working. And here's the beautiful thing. Even though I am not worthy of joining him in that work, he asks me to be a part of that very work, to join him in the very purpose that he has created me to do, to be his image bearers throughout the whole world. Now, to understand the story of how God is at work today, we have to understand how the center of Christianity has moved over time. Now, over the years, we see that it does. The center of Christianity does move from one place to another. So from the Mount of Olives, where Jesus gave that final commission to his disciples, we see that the very starting place of this commission is the church there in Jerusalem. That was where it was to go forth, from Jerusalem and then on to Judea and then on to Samaria and then ultimately to the ends of the earth. And we see that the book of Acts records that this actually happens, this movement to the ends of the earth actually happens. Now, the 11 apostles and many other committed disciples of Christ, like the apostle Paul, did take the message beyond Jerusalem. In fact, that message went far and wide. During the time of Jesus' day, you have the Roman Empire. And so that message went to every corner of the Roman Empire. And we see it even went beyond the edge of the Roman Empire. That's how far the message had gone. And then we see in 600 AD, the Muslims came and conquered Jerusalem. Was that the end of Christianity? Was Christianity done? Was it gone? No, it wasn't, because Christianity had spread into North Africa and into Rome. Because Rome was such an important center in the Roman Empire, this became the new center of Christianity. It shifted from Jerusalem to Rome. Rome became this new center. But after 200 years, the barbarians conquered Rome. Was this the end of Christianity? The answer is no. It wasn't the end of Christianity. In fact, Christianity now by this time had spread into a more Western direction and was growing in Europe and particularly in England. The late 1800s marked a new time period called the Age of Imperialism. And this age of imperialism is when you have these European superpowers like England, like France, like Belgium and Spain and Portugal and the Netherlands. They began a phase of world conquest and empire building. Each believed that by adding and gaining resources from these colonies, that they would bring great wealth and they would bring great prosperity to their country and to their nation. But at the same time, they believed that they were bringing important change. They were bringing reforms. They were also bringing Christianity. We see that England emerges as the king of the empire builders. In fact, England's colonies covered 1/4 of the world's geographical map. And they were ruling over 458 million people during that time. So this imperialistic expansion helped to make London, England, the new center for Christianity. Particularly as colonization brought about an opportunity for the missionary movement to many unreached people groups, to many new countries. And this went in the direction of Central America. It went into Africa. It went into Asia, into all the colonies that were being developed by these European superpowers. And it was during this time of expansion that the London Missionary Society came into existence. We also see missionaries like William Carey, who went to India, Robert Moffat, who was a missionary to Africa, David Livingstone, another missionary to Africa, Hudson Taylor, who went to China, and Adoniram Judson, who went to Burma. All of these men had a great mark on missions and the missionary movement. And the more missionaries that went, the more that actually this whole movement continued to grow. But next we see another shift, another movement. And so the next movement that we want to talk about, there were several factors that caused this next shift of Christianity. And this next shift is a movement towards into the U.S. as a new center of the missionary movement. So first, the age of empire building gave way to the Industrial Revolution. And the United States was really at the heart of a lot of the Industrial Revolution. They became very prosperous. They had a disposable income. And through that disposable income, they had the means to be able to support causes like the missionary movement. There's another reason why the shift happens to the United States from England. When the founding fathers of the United States set up the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it provided a pathway for religious beliefs to flourish. And out of that flourishing of beliefs, we see this missionary movement. And the third reason that caused the center of Christianity to shift to the United States is because the number of Christians in the United States surpassed the number of Christians in England, and then surpassed the number of Christians in all of Europe. And so the United States became this new center of Christianity, the new center of sending, the new center of giving for the missionary enterprise. And so because of these three reasons, we see that the United States began leading the charge in this missionary endeavor. We see more and more laborers coming out of the United States. And it's during this time that we also see many different missionary organizations that are developed in the United States. We see men like Cameron Townsend. We see a man like Ralph Winters, Jim Elliot, and Paul Fleming were a few who had an impact on this missionary movement that was coming out of the United States. And we see also in this fertile soil that this is the fertile soil that New Tribes Mission, now called Ethnos360, comes into existence. This huge shift of the center of Christianity moving from London to the United States, really we start seeing it take place around the late 1990s. And we call this shift that is taking place the rise of the global South and the explosion of the non-Western church. You see, at the beginning of the 1900s, by far most of the missionaries who were being sent out to the unreached places were from Western countries. That's what it looked like in the 1900s. And then as time went on, things began to change. This graph shows the number of missionaries that were sent out from 1900 onwards. And in green, what we can see is Western missionaries being sent out. In yellow, we can see non-Western missionaries sent out. So back in 1900, 89% of all missionaries who were sent out were from the West. But you can see that this begins to fall right around here at the 1960s. This is when non-Western missionaries began to increase. And where those lines begin to cross, where we have now 50% Western, 50% non-Western, we see that's right around 1990 or 2000. You can see now that where we are in history, 63% of people who are taking the message to the ends of the earth aren't Western missionaries. They are now from what we call the global South. They're from locations like Brazil and South Korea and the Philippines and China and Nigeria and India and Mexico. That's because the center of Christianity is in this process of changing. It's shifting. We all can observe what we're seeing even here in the United States. You've probably observed even in your lifetime, you've seen that Christianity isn't as strong as it once was. Does that mean that Christianity is done? No, it's not done. It is changing. It's changing from the United States to the global south. It's spreading to places like South America. It's spreading back to places like Africa. It's spreading back to Asia. So in one sense, I would say this is a very sad thing to see the United States in this state of decline. You see us sending less and less missionaries, less and less engaged in the work of reaching unreached people groups. But on the other hand, you see this as something that's very exciting because God is doing something very special. And what is that? What is God doing? God is making his church more global. Now that's exciting. It's not just Westerners, it's becoming a global church. And it's particularly advancing in the global south. Now, Andrew Wall, he says it like this. He says this: the Christian story is serial. And he's going to explain what this means. Its center moves from place to place. No one church or place or culture owns it. And that's what we have seen happen through history. That's what we've been seeing as we've been looking at the movement from Jerusalem to Rome to Europe, and then to England, and then to the United States, and then ultimately to the global south. He goes on to say, cross-cultural diffusion has been necessary to Christianity. It has been its lifeblood, and without it, the faith could not have survived. And that's what we've seen through history. So God is doing two very exciting things in the world today. First of all, he's inviting people to join him in reaching unreached ethnic peoples in all parts of the world. He's inviting you and I to be a part of that task. He's inviting us to do the very thing that we were created to do, to be image bearers to a lost and dying world. He's inviting us to take this precious message of the gospel so that people who don't yet know Jesus would know who he is, who would know that their purpose for being created is found in him. And to know that through his death and burial and resurrection, and that now he's returned as the king, that they can enter into his royal family. And secondly, we see another exciting thing, that he's making his church more global. And what's exciting about that is that we're seeing increasingly in the world people from the global church responding to God's call in their lives in the Great Commission. They're sharing in the message of Jesus to the rest of the world who have not yet heard. So we together get to be a part of taking this message to those people. But God is using a lot more people than just the Western church. He's using the global church. Welcome back. In our last session, we saw how the center of Christianity is serial. Basically what we mean by that is that it is not fixed in one place. We saw how it moved from Jerusalem to Rome, and Rome to Europe, Europe to London, England, London, England to the United States, and ultimately United States to the global south. And that's an exciting thing because God is making his church more global. Now, in this session, what we want to do is we want to focus on, again, some recent progress in the Great Commission. We want to answer the question, where are we seeing this progress? And we're going to look at 5 particular countries in the global south where there is some dramatic recent progress. So that's what we're going to do now. But to begin with, I want to begin with some general trends that we see happening right now in missions. According to statistics generated by the Center for World Missions and the Global Evangelization Movement, non-Western missionaries are increasing at a rate of about 9 to 10%. Did you catch that? 9 to 10%. They are increasing over Western missionaries. This is significant. And this is what is fueling what we're saying is it's becoming a more global task. The rise of the global south, the rise of the non-Western church, that this mission is going farther and wider. Western Christians are now only 1/4 of the worldwide body of believers. Of this number, North Americans constitute perhaps 10 to 15% of the worldwide committed church. Only 10 to 15%. And if we think we're the end-all, the be-all of what's going on in the world, we're missing nearly 85% of what God is really doing. We want to get a sense of that. True Christianity also has grown by more than 300 million believers in the past 10 years. What is remarkable about this statistic is where that growth is actually happening. See, in the last 10 years, 10 million of these new Christians are from North America and Europe. Only 10 million. That means that the rest, 290 million, are from developing countries in the global south, like Brazil and Korea and Philippines and China and Nigeria and India and Mexico. That's an exciting thing. Finally, Africa is critical for the future of global Christianity. In the next 10 years, Africa will likely grow to have the most Christians of any continent, probably around 700 million. So now let's highlight some individual countries from the global south. Let's get a sense of what God is doing in some of this dramatic progress that is taking place in these individual countries. We're going to start our journey there in South Korea. Now in 1900, Korea had no Protestant church, and it was deemed impossible to penetrate. That's really interesting. Today, it is estimated that 6 new churches open every day in South Korea. And South Korea is the site of 9 of the world's largest churches, some with congregations of more than 800,000 people. Today, South Korea is 30% Christian, with 7,000 churches in Seoul, South Korea alone. In 1982, there were 321 Protestant missionaries. By 1992, that number had grown to 2,576. On May 25th, 1995, the South Korean church dedicated 105,000 young people for at least 2 years of mission service. Wow, isn't that amazing? This strong passion for going and reaching unreached is fueling this whole thing that's going on in the global south. There are 1 million Koreans in northern China, in an area called Jilin, a northeastern province along the North Korean border. There has been a great revival in this location. And it's estimated there are about 100,000 believers that have emerged there as a direct result of South Korean missionaries who went and settled in that location. In fact, the impact was so significant that the Chinese government responded by kicking many South Korean missionaries from this location out of the country. So that's South Korea. Dramatic progress happening there. Now let's continue our journey. We're going to go to the country of Cambodia. In 1990, it was estimated that there were only 10 tiny fellowships of believers in the communist country of Cambodia. By 1997, that number grew to about 300 fellowships. Then in 2005, there were about 1,000 churches. Today, it is estimated that there is a new church being planted in Cambodia each and every week, or approximately 50 a year. In 2005, Cambodia had about 100,000 believers. By 2022, it is estimated that there are now 482,850 believers. God's at work in Cambodia. Let's continue our journey to the country of the Philippines. The Philippines is another country that has seen incredible progress. In 1975, the Philippines had about 3,000 churches. By 2005, in 20 years, that number increased to more than 55,000 churches. There are roughly around 8 million plus Filipinos living and working around the world as overseas Filipino workers, in which they are strategically placed, particularly in the 1040 window. And there are also 2,829 Filipino missionaries sent out through 122 agencies to about 77 countries. They can be found in many countries working as professionals, seafarers, or domestic helpers. I find this one also very interesting. Today, Filipino house servants have done more to spread the gospel in the Middle East than all missionary activity combined. Filipino housemates have done more for the gospel than all missionary activity combined. Isn't that incredible? They're bringing their faith right into these Muslim homes. They're boldly sharing with the children. They're boldly sharing with the wives, and that's impacting whole families. It's amazing to me when you take your faith seriously, like we see some of those Filipino maids doing, how it impacts the world, a global impact. Now let's move to another country. Let's take a look at some dramatic recent progress in China. There has been great progress since Hudson Taylor and others first went to China. In 1948, there were less than 1 million believers in China. But China turned hostile to Christianity after the 1949 revolution. Religion threatened the Communist Party's totalitarian vision, and Christianity was associated with foreign influences. By 2008, the number of believers had grown to be about 125 million Christians. A recent study estimated that there could be as many as 247 million Christians in China by 2030, and more than 160 million of those Protestant believers. Pre-COVID, it was estimated that there were more than 12,000 new Christian believers a day. And so what we see right now going in China is a great need for discipleship, training pastors, in equipping, because so many new believers are springing up. The previous 5 years saw a concerted effort to limit missionary activity and to arrest pastors who tried to hide their involvement in the underground church. During the past 5 years, there have been unprecedented numbers of missionaries who have been kicked out of China. And many NGOs, non-government organizations, have been kicked out as well. But on a positive note, the Communist Party seems to have backed off of all of the detentions of Christian pastors. They seem to have backed out somewhat on the removal of missionaries, which is something to rejoice about. Overall, there is no country in the world that comes anywhere close to the amount of surveillance that is going on in China. They have CC cameras that are monitoring what people are doing all the time, especially believers and especially Christian activity. One thing we understand well throughout history, every time repressive governments have attempted to stop Christianity, what we have seen, that through that persecution, it has only grown stronger. Believers have only grown stronger and faster. And then finally, there's another optimistic sign that we can see going on right now in China. A recent study found that the internet searches, the popular internet searches that are going on, people are searching for Christian congregation and Jesus rather than Communist Party and President Xi Jinping. Again, we see some incredible things going on in China. Now, finally, we want to move and shift our attention to India and see some progress going on there. Now, according to church history, the gospel came to India by the Apostle Thomas. And his influence impacted primarily South India. The trend we see that North India is primarily a very dark place. There are many, many unreached people groups in that location. A new campaign against the conversion of Hindus to Christianity is evidence of success of the gospel going forth and the spread of the gospel in India. Strong Hindu leaders are trying to implement anti-conversion laws. Basically, it's illegal to share the gospel. It's illegal to convert someone. That's what they're trying to do. And we see right now that 8 of the 28 states in India have already successfully passed these anti-conversion laws. But I can personally testify to you about an extreme hunger that is going on in India. As I said at the beginning in my introduction, I've been involved in a discipleship and an equipping program called Equip Asia. And so I have a great privilege to be involved in helping to equip and disciple those in India. And so what I'm seeing right now as people are being equipped, as they have an opportunity to study, just like you are, an opportunity to learn God's heart for the nations, that this is exciting people, that the numbers are growing. In fact, all of our students in Equip Asia, we have students from South Africa and Nepal and India and Vietnam and the Philippines and Russia and Myanmar. So we have students from all these locations, but we have more than half of our students are coming from India. Again, that shows an extreme hunger, an extreme desire to be equipped, an extreme hunger to be prepared for the work of bringing the gospel message to unreached people groups. So in conclusion, we've had the chance to look at these 5 different countries. They're all countries from the global south, and we're seeing dramatic recent progress. I think we could look at other countries and see progress that is going on there as well. Overall, the number of missionaries coming out of the United States is still greater than any other single country. But overall, the number of missionaries coming from the global south is significant. There are more and more missionaries coming from the non-Western church. It's growing in number. It's growing in participation in the unfinished. Exciting thing to see how God is making his church more global. He's adding more laborers from the global south into this harvest field of unreached people groups, particularly from those from non-Western countries in the global south.